Hi, I'm Metta Spencer. I'm in Toronto and I'm going to have a really good time talking with somebody who's in LA. This is Tom Newmark, who is the head of something called the Carbon Underground, which sounds like a very commendable organization doing all the right things. Because clearly, among the issues that we need to tackle are, first of all, making sure everybody gets enough to eat in this world. And that means looking after how we take care of the soil and how we farm. And another thing we have to worry about is global warming. And certainly keeping the carbon in underground sounds like one of the very best ways of approaching that issue. So hi, Tom Newmark.
Really a pleasure to chat with you today.
Now, Tom has a backdrop behind him of his farm in Costa Rica. And isn't it gorgeous? There's a mountain back there behind him, which he says is a live volcano. I had no idea there were volcanoes in Costa Rica, but it's certainly a pretty thing. I don't know whether I want to get up there and climb around on it, but anyway, it's beautiful background and lovely foliage. And what do you raise on your farm? What's your crop?
Well, our principal crops will be cacao, from which chocolate is made, and vanilla, and ginger, and turmeric, and black pepper, and clove, and allspice, and nutmeg, and mace. I mean, it's tropical spices.
All of those things are things that you can buy in capsules because they're supposed to be good for you, right? I take supplements full of things like that. So maybe some of my turmeric pills come from you. Who knows?
Well, we have, in fact, the origin of the farm, and my farm's name is Finca, which means farm in Spanish, Finca Luna Nueva. And our farm has a lodge, which is a teaching center. So it's a recreational but educational experience.
Now, you mentioned that it's part of your project, that you explain how that works. What's the connection between being the kind of regenerative farmer that I know you are and this project of, I don't know, what do you call it?
The Carbon Underground.
No.
I call it, it's the regenerative agricultural movement.
Yeah, but you said something about a kind of tourism and things.
Right, there is ecotourism, but I mean that's really kind of an ancillary piece to the Carbon Underground's mission is very specific, and the farm that I operate together with my co-founder of the Carbon Underground, Larry Copold, and Larry is the president of the Carbon Underground, and I am the chairperson. And our farm is a teaching center that we bring people to, or that people come to us to learn about the work of regenerative agriculture, the opportunity, the hope, the mission, the promise of regenerative agriculture. But it's really a very small piece of the overall global work of the Carbon Underground. The Carbon Underground is based here in the United States, but its footprint is global. Our work, we advise nations, we advise state governments, we advise the world's largest food corporations. So from either the supply chain management side or from the perspective of governmental policy, our focus is very simple: to promote a type of agriculture that reverses climate change and produces food resilience so that in the future we can produce food. So you mentioned two things. It's important for humans to be able to eat, but we have to live in a climate that is habitable, that is livable. It just so happens that those two fundamental requirements converge and are expressed through the idea of regenerative agriculture. And if I may, I'd like to explain
Please.
ecologically what gave rise to the carbon underground.
That's exactly what I hope we'll focus on, because I think that is really, globally, that's the thing we need to focus on. Maybe one of the very, very top priorities. So,
we are being told, and this was a report that was published last week, and it was a report that was endorsed by Dr. James Hansen, who is the NASA scientist in the United States in the 1980s, sounded the original alarm about global warming. This is a peer-reviewed, very thoroughly scientifically vetted report, and it stated that at current trends of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we will double by the year 2060 the amount of CO2 that was present in the Earth's atmosphere immediately prior to the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution, a couple of hundred years ago, the carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere numbered at around 270 carbon dioxide molecules per million molecules in the atmosphere. So that's 270 parts per million. And that's an important number because, as you and your viewers appreciate, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means that it traps heat, so that when solar energy bathes the planet with heat, and then the surface of the Earth heats up, and then heat is reflected back or radiates off of the surface, most of that heat dissipates and goes off into space. But enough heat is trapped by greenhouse gases that we are not a frozen planet. And the just right amount that supports life that is comfortable for humans is in that 250, 270, 300 parts per million range. You know the story of Goldilocks. Some porridge was too hot, some was too cold, but there was that porridge that was just right. Well, it turns out that about 270 parts per million is the just right Goldilocks level of that greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. If we had too little greenhouse gas, we would freeze because there wouldn't be enough heat trapped.
Yeah.
If we have too much, welcome to Venus. Welcome to an atmosphere that would be so hot that it could not possibly support life, at least not life as we know it. So a couple of hundred years ago, we were at 270 parts per million. Now, today, we are, do you know the level now, Metta, today?
Oh, well up there in the close to 400.
It's about 416 parts per million. That's correct.
The idea was, somebody said 350 would be our goal, just to get it down to that point. But
that's the absolute highest level that planetary scientists believe is a level that could possibly permit the survival of the human species in the long term. And that's why Bill McKibben and Betsy Taylor and other environmental activists came up with that concept of 350 as a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So 350.org is an admirable organization of environmental activists and dreamers, like we're activists and dreamers. And the goal is to get back down to 350. But then last week, this scientific paper, which is a deeply respected paper, said that if trends don't change, we will, in a few decades, be at 560.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the death knell for, certainly for humans and for life as we know it on this planet. I mean, our planet's been very hot before. Back before plants, I mean, look at all the plants behind me. Back before plants inhabited the terrestrial zone, we're talking now 500 million years ago, the Earth had 5 to 6,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And it was very hot. And we wouldn't have wanted to even attempt to live in that environment. But because of what plants are able to do, because they literally eat sunshine,
Mm-hmm.
those leaves are solar panels. So these leaves right here, these are solar panels, and they're collecting sunlight, and then they breathe in carbon dioxide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they, through their roots and sometimes through their leaves, are taking in water. So they are a solar powered biological machine which takes CO2, carbon dioxide, and H2O, water, breaks apart those molecules, rearranges the atoms, and they create carbohydrates. Like, we like to eat carbohydrates. Why? Because they give us energy. Why do they give us energy? Because that's how Mother Nature stores solar energy. That's how Mother Nature has figured out a way, using photosynthesis, to capture photons of energy from the sun, convert them into a liquid carbon, a sweet sunshine, the sap of the plant. And that sap, the carbohydrates in the plant, satisfy the needs, the metabolic needs of all the plants, and they make enough that they can pass that liquid carbon through their roots and then share that liquefied sweet solar energy with organisms that live in the ground. And the process of the bacteria and the fungi and the nematodes and the archaea and the protists and the earthworms and all of the different life forms that live in the soil, and they're eating this liquid carbon, they're eating this sweet sugary sunshine, and when they eat, they metabolize, and like us, they excrete, and they sometimes eat other microorganisms, and they sometimes die. And all of these organisms below the ground, and in every little thimbleful of soil, there can be billions and billions of microorganisms. It's said that in a thimbleful of soil, there are more microorganisms than there are humans on the entire surface of the planet. And this is everywhere. So there are countless infinities of microorganisms, and they're living, and they're excreting, and they're dying, and they're creating sticky stuff. They're creating glue and gum, and I mean, the scientists refer to it as necromass, literally the mass of dead tissue in the soil. And it's that necromass which combines with the particles of sand and of clay and and mineral salts in their non-living form. There is this alchemy in the soil that happens, where the glues and gums of the necromass combining with the elements in the soil, it creates organic matter. And organic matter is about 60% carbon. So How did we get from 5,000 parts per million of CO2 500 million years ago down to 270 parts per million? These folks did it. The plants did it in collaboration with fungi and with bacteria. And that circus of life, that underground party that was going on, which was fueled by solar power, that's what created an atmosphere that is enjoyable and habitable. Now, it also created oil and gas, because when in different times, geological eras, there were events that buried plants either on the ground or in the ocean. Pockets of plants would go through a decomposition process, and we would end up with oil and gas, which we know of as fossil fuels. So people today think that the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, remember, we're at 416 parts per million today. We started at 270. People think, well, that all came from burning gasoline and diesel and coal. I mean, that's what most people think. Most people think that all of the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere came from the burning of fossil fuels. And that's correct in part. Certainly, a significant amount of the excess CO2 in the atmosphere came from the combustion, the burning of fossil fuels. But over time, about half of all of the excess CO2 in the atmosphere came right from the ground, came from
because it was released out of the soil somehow. It escaped from the soil. Yeah.
Well, escaped because of agricultural malpractice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Escaped because of things that we have done to the soil, which damaged it, which damaged the homeostasis, the equilibrium. You know, for tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years, we had a livable planet, a livable climate. And then we started mucking things up. I mean, you've heard of the Neolithic Revolution, the dawning of agriculture 8 to 10,000 years ago. That was the beginning of our mistake. But then we really started to mess things up with the invention of the plow about 5,000 years ago. And then we really started to mess things up with the creation of synthetic fertility, of synthetic nitrogen and potassium and other synthetic nutrients, much of which came right from fossil fuels. And it's the use of synthetic fertility together with the deep, aggressive, continuous plowing of the flesh of the earth, the soil, that has created this dramatic off-gassing. So all the carbon that had been trapped, or what scientists say sequestered in the soil in the form of soil organic matter, or what gardeners refer to as humus or as tilth, that rich soil. You can smell it, and you know your plants love it because it smells sweet. And it's mostly carbon. It's 60% carbon. And that carbon came from the atmosphere.
You know, everything you said up to now, you started off, I think it was real poetry. You know, your description of this whole process is just moving. It was inspiring and beautiful. And I was wondering, when's he going to get to the yes, but? The yes, but phase is where we have to think about what we did wrong and what we have to do to put all that stuff, all that carbon back, a lot of it back underground. Exactly.
Right. So
Metta, how are we going to do it?
The issue. I could tumble these numbers for you, and trust me, I've done this many, many times.
Mhm.
Many planetary scientists have done it. Trust me on this figure. We have 1 trillion tons of excess CO2 in the atmosphere. From when we started in the Industrial
It's
Revolution,
too much. That's how much too much we have.
we have too much. We have 1 trillion tons of legacy excess CO2,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a giant thermal blanket trapping heat and causing the planet to heat up not 1 degree centigrade, not 2 degrees centigrade, but remember that paper I mentioned that was just published last week? The scientific best judgment as to the range of heating that is almost inevitably going to occur is somewhere between 2.5 to almost 4 degrees centigrade. Now, at that point, the planet doesn't resemble our planet. The oceans will be dead.
Right.
Life as we know it, and we will go extinct. So if we don't figure out a place to put that legacy 1 trillion tons, we're cooked. So where could we put it? All right. Well, we could put it, maybe we could put it back in the fossil fuel reserves. But wait a minute, that takes millions and millions of years. And that would require a geological event that is unanticipated. So that's not a possibility for us. We could put it in the ocean, but the oceans are already acidifying because of the carbon dioxide that is going into the oceans. We're already seeing a worldwide die-off of coral. We're already seeing a collapse of biodiversity in the oceans as the oceans warm up and acidify. We dare not put one more molecule of CO2 in the ocean. All right, so those are 3 fossil fuel sinks. Those are carbon sinks. We have fossil fuel, we have the ocean, and then there's the green stuff. Maybe we could grow more trees. Well, yeah, we should. We should have more trees. Where there has been deforestation, we should reforest, and that would be appropriate. Where we've destroyed the great prairies and grasslands of the planet, we should take every imaginable effort to reestablish those ecosystems. But interestingly, that's really not the biggest possible tank or sink for carbon. The biggest sink that's available by far, magnitudes many times greater than all above ground green living things added all together, is the soil itself.
Mm-hmm.
We can put enough carbon back in the soil whence it came. I mean, it came from, right? So Mother Earth says to us, there's a place to put this carbon. It's back in the soil. It's rebuilding the topsoil that you've damaged. You asked me for the yes, but the United Nations issued a report in 2015 saying that at the current rate of soil destruction, because of the industrial, conventional, chemical, agricultural process, with deep tilling and with synthetic fertility, we are destroying our soil so rapidly that we will run out of soil and will be unable to produce food in 60 years.
Mm-hmm. I've heard something similar to that, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to be around in 60 years, but my children and grandchildren we hope, will be. And we got to do something, because for the generations that follow us and are going to say, Metta and Tom, what the heck? What did you do to us? When you were born, the planet was livable, and you're delivering me a broken planet that won't be able to produce food and that is overheating. And I go, yes, but there's a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And the solution is, okay, is there a technology that has been time tested, that is proven to work, that can take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and convert it stably into something that is beneficial and reverse climate change? And the answer is, you're looking at it. That's the technology,
Uh-huh.
right? The same technology that took us from 5,000 parts per million down to 270 parts per million. If we work with a mindset of using plants as our allies to regenerate the damaged ecosystem, agronomists and planetary scientists are now saying that we can reverse climate change and we can rebuild soil, but we've got to get started immediately. And so that is what you ask me what I do day and night. I give talks like this day and night. And we do it to corporate supply chain managers. We do it to CEOs, because they know. I used to be the CEO of a major international food company. I've got lots of friends who were CEOs. And I recently called many of them and I said, how many of you have supply chains that are at risk of breaking because of global warming? And all of them acknowledged that their supply chains are precarious. So we go around talking to CEOs and supply chain managers, and we say, there's a fix. It's not hopeless. There is a business plan that will actually fix your problem. And we go to government leaders. Larry Copal, my partner in the Carbon Underground, and I went to Thailand many times last year, spoke with national leaders there. And the national leaders there said, our soils are destroyed. Can you, the Carbon Underground, help us repair and regenerate and revive our soils so that our farmers have a future and our citizens have food? Can you help us? And our answer was, we got this. There are agronomists, there are scientists, there are farmers, consultants around the world who know how to do this, who know how to convert a wasteland into a forest. And in fact, at my farm, this is what we demonstrate. This is what we model. We show people around the world. We had a conference a few years ago of people from 23 nations coming to our farm, where we were showing people the mechanics of using photosynthesis, using regenerative agriculture to rebuild soil, to put carbon back underground, and to reverse climate change, which, by the way, also reestablishes the water battery in the soil, so that rather than when rains come, the soil washes off in massive erosion events, instead, the soil soaks up the water. It sounds too good to be true, but it is that good. And it is true. And it is now being done in tens of millions of acres with tens of millions of farmers around the globe. And our job, and I thank you, Metta, for helping us get this message out. Our job is to tell people it's not hopeless, that there is a way to have a livable future for our children and our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to start doing it right now. Tomorrow is too late.
Okay, I think that is really inspiring, and everything that you've said, I was already there. You didn't have to persuade me a bit. Uh,
Wonderful.
so the question is now how to get not only how, but first what? Exactly what kinds of technologies, what procedural changes need to be made in farming that will do this? What makes a difference? There are various things I know about, diversity, and let's talk about some of the technological changes that need to be made, like not plowing. My grandfather spent 50 or 60 years behind a plow, up and down. That was his life. I think of that poor man, the furrows that he went back and forth, back and forth. He was a tenant farmer in Oklahoma. And it was a great day when he got a horse. And it was an even greater day when he got the John Deere tractor because he could do it on a bigger scale and not as much labor. And I think, oh, I used to feel sorry for him, but now I feel sorry for us. Look at what all that was about. Why did he do that? Tell me.
Well, that's because that's what he was taught to do. So he was captured by a paradigm. He was captured by this idea of using chemistry and using a knife cutting through the flesh of Mother Earth. I mean, this is what they were taught.
Mm.
So farmers are good people.
But with the invention of the plow was considered one of those great breakthroughs in human history.
About 10 years ago, the great anthropologist Jared Diamond, who wrote the book Guns, Germs, and Steel, and is considered one of the great thinkers today, said that the invention of the plow and the Neolithic Revolution was the greatest mistake that humans ever made.
Mm-hmm.
We know this now, but historically, those inventions were celebrated because they, in theory, allowed civilizations as we respect them to emerge, permitted a type of agriculture that would support giant cities. And so people thought, well, this was inevitable. It was maybe the manifest destiny of humans to do with the plow and with chemicals, like we used to think that was the manifest destiny of Europeans coming to North America to take over Oklahoma and displace from Oklahoma the indigenous peoples who lived there for thousands of years and didn't destroy the ecosystem. So we're captured by a lot of mistakes or thinking, and it's good people have made these terrible mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I now feel terrible for all the farmers around the world because their farms are dying.
Well, how quickly can they see the light, so to speak? I'm fascinated by the challenge of how to orchestrate what would be a revolution. I don't like the word revolution because it sounds bloody, but a revolution in thinking and of action. Who's going to do it and how? I've been interviewing other people. You're not the first regenerative farmer that I've interviewed, so I know a little bit about what their life is like, and it's not an easy life, frankly.
Let me just. I need to unpack a couple of things you've said, and it pertains to what is the technology of regeneration, and I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to answer what's it going to take to make this happen, to launch the revolutions are already launched, but to really make it work. All right. So as to the technology, So regenerative agriculture has been defined by soil scientists as agriculture that accomplishes 4 outcomes. And you don't have to take notes here. You can go to the soilcarboninitiative.org, soilcarboninitiative.org, and there is this SCI index, the soil carbon index, created by agronomists, by scientists, by farmers, by NGOs, by environmentalists. And so what I'm telling you, because the Carbon Underground helped to give birth to the Soil Carbon Initiative with other NGOs and corporate leaders, actually, there are 4 indicia of a regenerative system. Number 1, year after year, harvest after harvest, you will have more soil organic matter in the ground than the year before. So there's more carbon in the ground. Number 2, that's achieved with biology. That's achieved with a greater abundance of both below ground and above ground, and you used the word before, biodiversity. And so this is not achieved by injecting in some high-tech way carbon into the ground. It's achieved with the plants in collaboration with the soil food web, with all of nature, stabilizing carbon into the structure of soil organic matter, humus or tilth. So number 1, there's more soil organic matter. Number 2, you will have more below and above ground biodiversity. Number 3, you will have a greater ability to soak up or to have water infiltrate into the ground. So like, look back behind me, that's rainforest. So when there's a massive rain in the tropics, if you were to go out into that rainforest 15 minutes, 5 minutes after that massive rain, you would not see pools of water, puddles of water on the ground. The ground has a soil water battery that soaks up and makes effective every drop of rain. And the 4th indicia of a regenerative system is that the structure of the soil, the stability of the soil is improved, so that when the rains come, it isn't friable, or it isn't hard pan, and you don't have erosion, and you actually have effective rain. So if you have those 4, then you have a regenerative system. And the soil carbon index, which again was created in collaboration with the Carbon Underground and Green America, and actually with some very major corporations. If the soil carbon index is an index, a standard, which allows a third party to go onto a farm and say, well, you're doing it right. Or to go onto a ranch and say, well, you're being regenerative. So how will we be able to enroll enough ranches and farms to make a difference? Well, here's the good news. The good news is we've got 5 billion hectares to work with. There are 3.5 billion hectares of grassland and 1.5 billion hectares of arable or farmland. So the sink is gigantic. Well, I mean, we may have 1 trillion tons in the atmosphere. Well, we got a 5 billion hectare sink, and we can store all the excess carbon that we need to back into the living tissue of the soil that we call a carbon sink. It's really living tissue. So who's going to be the driving force of that? You know, there are those who say that it's going to take a generational change, that the old time farmers who only knew it the old way of the plow and the synthetic fertility, they're too locked in their way. We're not finding that. Farmers and ranchers are desperate. They're desperate. The streams, the lakes have disappeared. The perennial rivers have become ephemeral. The soils are gone. There was a report in England a few years ago that 3 meters of topsoil in England have gone down to bedrock because of agricultural malpractice. There really is no choice but to go regenerative, because you can't, you know, you can't squeeze the earth anymore. The earth is given up. There's just no more soil. And that's why the UN says there'll be no food at all left on the planet in 60 years. So there's a desperation. People are desperately seeking a new way. And you're seeing, and I'm here in Los Angeles in the United States, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. We want to make soil great again. We want to make the Great Plains great again. And there are a whole lot of regenerative ranchers and farmers who are Republicans, and a whole lot that are Democrats. This is a nonpartisan issue. This is all about being able to produce food.
Really true. That's fascinating. I mean, are you saying that it should be nonpartisan? Are you saying that really there's no difference between Democratic farmers and Republican farmers, that they are equally likely to listen to Tom Newmark?
You know, I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
I actually, it's in my experience, and I'd love to hear from people in your audience, their experience, other regenerators. Some of the greatest regenerators are red state Republican cowboys and cowgirls. I'm telling you, this is not a political issue.
Well, I'll tell you, let's get to an area where I know there is controversy, because I run into it myself a lot, and that is animals. The importance of, or the undesirability of farm animals that excrete carbon. So I know that you talk about restoring the grasslands, and I've been very interested in the work of Alan Savory, and whenever I mention that name, I get into all kinds of controversy with my vegetarian friends. You want to swing at that one, or do you just soon pass on that?
No, I got a great answer for you on that one. I am pretty much all but a vegan.
Are you?
Yeah.
All right.
And I know and respect, admire, and love Alan Savory and his wife Jody and the whole Savory organization. So here I am. I don't eat meat. I don't eat dairy, but I have a herd of dairy at my farm. And I believe, as do the folks with Savory and with adaptive multi-paddock grazing and many of the other folks who use livestock in regenerating degraded ecosystems, that livestock not only can be, but I think are indispensably necessary as a tool in regenerating grassland areas. Not in rainforest areas. You didn't have herds of ruminants in the rainforest. I mean, there just weren't. You didn't have that same evolutionary tango that you had on the Great Plains with the bison or with the wildebeest and zebra in Africa. But you got to look at every ecosystem, certainly all the grasslands. And that's a lot. That's 3.5 billion hectares on the planet, those co-evolved with animals. And the idea that we can take animals out of the ecosystem and expect natural biological processes to do their work without the involvement of animals, I think that's a fantasy. So
Well,
I am
let
actually
me let me say where I get hung up, because I'm you know I, what Alan Savory claimed originally was that herds of animals, if taken care of in this way, where they were clustered around and moved around appropriately and so on, you had to do it a very precise way rather than just letting them run around. Uh,
right,
but his claim was that this was going to be a way of preventing desertification,
correct,
like land that was dried up and non-fertile. You could make fertile again by having your animals move around in large
right,
herds appropriately. And but I don't see how you can do that without. Um, I mean, people are not going to be herding animals unless they're going to use the meat.
right.
So they're going to be eating the meat, and my friends are worried about the fact that this is. He didn't claim at the original, at the outset, that this was going to put more carbon back in the soil. As I understand what he said, it was not that it was going to restore carbon to the soil, but it was going to keep it from, drying up and blowing away, so to speak. And my friends who are vegans and who are environmentalists are very concerned about the fact that animals, excrete methane and burp and fart and make a big mess. And they feel that we have to stop eating meat just because we have to stop maintaining such large herds of animals that produce this. Uh, so I find it is a contradiction, and I think that some farmers claim, regenerative grazing people claim that actually, if you take care of your herds properly, your carbon is enhanced in the soil.
I think there's no question about that.
It's not a question now,
I think it's beyond cavil.
really. Oh,
I
all
am.
right. Because I'd seen it argued both ways, and
Well, I mean, there's always 10 different ways to slice the data, but I believe at this point that there are peer-reviewed published papers that I have read that I think are absolutely convincing. There are anecdotal reports that are overwhelmingly convincing. In fact, at my own farm, there's evidence of this. So to me, I have great love for vegans. As I said, I'm darn close to being one myself.
is this just a personal preference, or is it out of a conviction of some kind about how being a vegan is better for the planet?
Well, I don't, I mean, I was the chairperson of the Greenpeace Fund in the United States for many years. And there are a whole lot of vegans there in that organization. I love Greenpeace, born in Canada, of course. And I know that a lot of folks in the World Organization believe that we need to be meatless and that being vegan is the answer. And I would always say, and again, I have sympathy for vegans because that's who I am. But I would say, borrowing the words of my buddy Russ Conser, it's not the cow, it's the how.
Mm-hmm.
Not, it's not that you're raising beef or you have a dairy herd. It's how you're doing it. Sure, cattle belch methane, but there are data showing that in a well-managed, regenerative, holistically managed environment, that those ranches actually are methane sinks, that they have negative methane compared to areas around them. these are from really smart scientists who have published these data. So I understand on a spiritual and an emotional level that there are people who want to be vegans, and God love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would never tell a person who was a vegan for spiritual or emotional reasons not to be a vegan. But I will say that I don't know how we get to a livable planet without converting ranching to holistic in accordance with whether you call it savory, holistic management, or adaptive multi-paddock grazing. There are many different ways to describe the idea of managing livestock in a way where they are proxies for the wildlife that have been eradicated by us. I don't think we can get to the goal of a livable planet without having animal management practices that are holistic, because that's 3.5 billion hectares. So for those that want to be vegan, be vegan.
Oh yeah, okay.
By all means. But there are a lot of very soulful religious people that are comfortable in their hearts with eating animals.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just do so in a way that is holistic and that is a tool for repairing and regenerating ecosystems. So I don't want to denigrate and be negative about the vegan movement, but I do think in all candor that Alan Savory and Alan Williams and Richard Teague and Christine Jones and all of the scientists I'm now mentioning, I think they've got the better side of the scientific argument. I think we need to follow the science on this and follow the living history of our planet,
Mm-hmm.
where animals, it is not possible to imagine a healthy ecosystem in which animals have been removed from that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, for those carrot and radish eaters out there, me, but for the vegetarians and vegans of the world, don't fool yourself. Every time people pass a plow through a field, you are killing probably countless infinities of life forms every time we manipulate, certainly with the use of plows.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot get on a moral high ground. I mean, maybe those microorganisms and those earthworms, maybe they don't have eyes. Maybe they're not like sheep and goats and pigs and cows. But I don't know where it was written. I don't know who has the authority to say that those microorganisms don't have consciousness, that they don't have soul. I mean, I certainly do not have the knowledge sufficient to say this is where this line, these organisms have souls, these don't have souls. So, I mean, this is a topic for gurus, for popes, and for rabbis, not for me. But if you on a scientific level, every time you pass a plow through a field, you are killing countless life forms. So if that's the issue, then all vegans, immediately must only eat things that are grown regeneratively, because that will do the least violence to the life forms that are in the soil. So it's a really complicated question, and I've been in heated debates, and I'm a weird one here because I'm the vegan with the dairy farm.
That's wonderful. I like that.
The science.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I guess, I really am impressed by this point of view. Now the question is how we're going to get there again.
Okay.
again, and whether in fact it is, there must be places where you can see how the transformation to regenerative farming can be just as productive as otherwise, but there must be also places where looks harder. If you tell people you must stop plowing, can you raise every crop in the world without plowing? I I've heard of the inserting drills into the soil in order to put the seed in, or little tiny little slits so that you can put some
Right.
sort of uh, compost tea in with it or something of that kind. So there are wonderful tricks that I think people are taking up that I've not really been on a farm in years. I have no idea what it's really like, but I kind of intrigued by all of the innovations that I read about. But how far can that take you? Can you really expect to be uh, feed the something maybe 10 billion people that we have to anticipate? Um, how much growth in production can there be while doing this kind of caring for the earth?
All right, so let me just say this very bluntly, and I have the authority of the United Nations and the Food and Agriculture Organization thereof behind me. If we don't grow food regeneratively, then we will not have food for anyone soon. And I've been in farming food production regions all over the world that are drying up, that are dust in the wind. So the current system of agriculture is a dead system walking. There is no future for human life
Hmm.
with the current system. So if people say to me, oh, well, how can you feed people regeneratively? We damn well better figure that out, because we're not going to be able to feed them in the chemical, extractive, destructive system of agriculture that we currently have. There is every single crop that I know of can be raised regeneratively. It may be that on a per acre or per hectare basis, you may not be able to produce as much sugarcane or rice or potato per hectare. But it may be that while you're producing sugarcane and potato, you're also producing in alleys next to it other crops. And so you absolutely have to have biodiversity. You cannot have monoculture systems that are regenerative. Look behind me. This is an absolute explosion of biodiversity. You do not see in nature food being produced in linear, uniform rows of monoculture. It's not how nature produces food. And we have tried to produce food in a way that is unnatural. And look where that's gotten us. It's gotten us to a soil cliff, a water cliff, and a temperature cliff. So the only thing we can do is look at the genius of nature and say, well, how can we grow food? If I'm down in Costa Rica, how can I grow food like a forest produces food? How can I in Toronto or in Oklahoma grow food like food is produced in a prairie? We have to be biomimetic. We have to actually pattern our food production on how nature produces food.
Mhm.
And every single crop that I'm aware of, I have seen farmers able to do it in a regenerative way. They may not get as high a yield per acre, but they will have higher yields of all the food types that they're producing in their diverse farm. And during drought years, they will have crops. I could show you pictures. I don't want to do it now because I would have to toggle over to my photo library. I could show you pictures of scientific experiments that I supported in Costa Rica, where during a drought, the the conventional chemical field was dead and the regenerative field was completely living. So as climate extreme becomes the new normal, as droughts occur more and more frequently, as floods occur more and more frequently, we have got to build in through soil a resilience in the face of climate extreme. And so it may not be that every year, every acre, it's the same yield. But if you look at all the calories and all the nutrients produced per acre, especially during periods of climate extreme, farmers will do better. And I will tell you that I'm not the only one saying this. The CEOs that I talk to, they see it coming. I've been in a CEO suite where we asked, Larry Copal and I asked this major company, are you in your risk assessment understanding that in 20 years there may be no world supply of cotton because of the collapse of ecosystems and climate change? And the answer was yes. These major corporations in the textile and food business, they're being run by very smart men and women. And these very smart leaders can see around corners and they can see what's coming. And they say to me, and this, by the way, even Bayer last week announced they were going to be starting to pay farmers who were doing farming in a way that would sequester carbon. I mean, this is not some little hippie brother, sun, sister, moon fantasy of regeneration. These are the world's largest food and textile corporations talking to us saying, we know that the only future that will provide textiles and foods is a regenerative future. This is why in Thailand, with 35 million farmers, one of the largest food producing food exporters in the world, that's why the government of Thailand has come to the Carbon Underground asking us for help for their farmers. So whether it comes from Danone, which is focusing on regeneration, or General Mills focusing on regeneration, or Nestle focusing on regeneration, or even last week, and this is so controversial, and I don't want the brickbats coming at me from my friends who can't believe that it's possible for Bayer to be regenerative, and that's to be determined, right? I don't want to prejudge that. I mean, I do prejudge it, but even they are talking about regeneration. So the world's largest food producers and textile producers, they know that we have to go regenerative, as do governments. So what's it going to take for the revolution to occur? People who want to still have their businesses in 10 years, and governments who still want to be able to feed their people and have water to support their civilizations in 10 years. And when I say 10 years, I mean 10 years. We have 1.7 billion people on the planet right now who are living in a state of water peril.
Yeah.
Where they are taking out of the ecosystem more water than is being put back into the ecosystem. The largest populations in the world, in China, in Pakistan, in India, they're all fighting over the last drops of water in that increasingly parched ecosystem. Everyone knows that we have to have a change. So when you say to me, what will be the driving force? I tend to think that major corporations in their self-interest will be the driving force. And that's why the Carbon Underground focuses on working with the major corporations, because that is a lever that is big enough and powerful enough to move the planet. But we also want people in their homes looking out at their lawns, thinking permaculture, regeneration.
Put up that lawn and put in some vegetables.
There you go. There you go.
Our time's up. You know what? this has been more exciting than I could have possibly expected. It's really very, very rich. And I'm so enthusiastic about not only your ideas, but the fact that you're out there doing what you can do to make this happen. So I want to follow your activities or and that of the Carbon Underground and promote it as much as I can from where I sit here behind my little computer. Okay.
Well, Metta, thank you very much. Really appreciate your giving me the opportunity to talk about this hopeful opportunity.
Well, it's been a blessing, and I've enjoyed it, and we're going to pass the word along the best we can.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. Okay.
Take care.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
This conversation is one of the weekly series Talk About Saving the World, produced by Peace Magazine and Project Save the World. Please visit our website at tosavetheworld.ca, where you can sign the Platform for Survival, a list of 25 public policy proposals that, if enacted, would greatly reduce the risk of 6 global threats to humankind. Come back next week for another discussion of a serious global issue.